David Allemann is a Swiss entrepreneur and creative thinker and co-founder of On, the business that re-engineered running shoes. Alongside his co-founders, he turned an idea into one of the world's fastest growing sportswear companies.
We're an innovation brand, so we're constantly reinventing. We're sometimes even disrupting ourselves.
Under his guidance, On has gone from a Swiss startup to a publicly listed global brand.
What's the worst thing that can happen? And so we turned it around and said, hey, we do it from a nothing to lose mentality and rather ask what if.
He's proof that creativity and business can run side by side.
Good ideas are born on the move.
That's David Allemann. Welcome to the Business of Creativity series, brought to you by Amazon Ads. Do you know, I've been sitting here for about an hour looking out. I've kind of been inspired to kind of go, this is a wonderful place, I think, to start a running company, because you want to go out and run, don't you? How much do you think your environment has really guided your career? Has it been a part of what's made you who you are?
You know, I feel spaces are incredibly important to me. So I have an aesthetic eye, and so I feel the space you live, you work has a huge impact on you. And so I'm sitting here in the Blue Library, actually seeing some of the Swiss mountains out there is great. So you're surrounded by mountains, but by a lot of books as well.
It's important, get that juxtaposition of outside, inside. So tell me, your childhood, was there a creative element to it, or like so many people, was it just something you discovered in yourself? Was it brought out in you?
No, there was a lot of creativity in my childhood because my parents have both been architects. So my father was a Swiss brutalist architect inspired by Corbusier. My mother was kind of a modernism interior designer, and so that was very much the DNA of my upbringing.
Now, it's quite interesting, actually, because most of the people I'm interviewing a sort of single person who started something. You've got this unique kind of combination of three of you coming together, and I would say it's a bit like a band. You know, you come together and one represents one skill, one represents another skill. How did you come together?
So, you know, it is a little bit like a boy group, and so you need also different characters to make the music really good. And so Olivier is a duathlon world champion, 6-time Ironman winner. So he was running a lot, and so he had time to think a lot about running shoes. And he came up with the original concept and cut at home a garden hose to put some elements under a shoe to prove that an engineering principle can actually change the shoe. He knew Casper well. Casper and I worked together first in consulting, then in advertising. And so that's how we came together.
It started with a piece of innovation. It started with a profound piece of innovation. The way he designed the sole to give you more cushion, more forward motion, whatever it was. And that sort of functionality, in a sense, do you think that constantly drives the company, that need for something functional within what you do?
Yes, it's absolutely foundational to On. So we're an innovation company at heart. And so that idea of, hey, could we change something in the engineering of an outsole? Because until back then, outsoles were pretty much in a material play. So how can I put a better mattress underneath your foot? And now coming with Swiss engineering into that and changing how a shoe works, that was foundational and continues to be up to our latest technology, light spray, which again has been an engineering idea.
And the other thing I like about it is you can see it. You know, it's a piece of innovation that you can actually, I can see that. That's, you know, but a lot of innovation sometimes you can't see.
You're absolutely right. I feel that it's, we call it Vis Tech, or visible technology, is very helpful because I feel there has been so much marketing in, especially in the whole sneaker and running shoe segment as well. You know, the little abbreviation that tells you something that should be in that insole and you don't know. that really having something that you can see and understand is so helpful.
So the three of you meet up and you say, I know, we'll start a running shoe company. Now, I mean, most people say, don't be silly. Come on. You've got these huge companies. There are, lots of them out there. What was your feeling at that moment? Did you all feel we can do it, or was it just full of fear?
At the beginning, I think it was a feeling, but it was the feeling of the shoe, because Olivier had given us a shoe and we tested it out not far from here up in the woods in Zurich. And so Oli was there and said, hey, how does it feel? How does it feel? And he had given me a shoe with this garden hose, so elements that I, of course, destroyed after a short run because they fell off. He had just glued it under a shaved off shoe. But that feel was different, really different, in the same sense that the first carving ski that I used, or the first full suspension mountain bike that I used. So a moment where technology changed the feel of sports equipment. And so we were very much intrigued.
Yeah, so it was a real belief in kind of this, I feel this can work. But even so, you still go, I mean, come on. So you start with a great product and then you go, right, now we've got to give it a name.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning it was daunting, of course. And so we fooled a little bit around for a few months and we're going back and forth. But then there was a moment when we said, hey, what should we do? And we decided we go on a long, long hike. And so we went on a hike in the Engadine Valley in the mountains. And the higher we climbed, the more optimistic we got, because then you come from the dark valley and you start to see the different peaks and the panorama. And we turned the question around and said, hey, what do we have to lose? And the reality, I feel, is we live in such a privileged place, Switzerland, with so much security that you forget you actually don't have so much to lose. What's the worst thing that can happen? And so we turned it around and said, hey, we do it from a nothing to lose mentality and rather ask what if. Yeah. What if became the question.
That's a great way of approaching it, isn't it? What have we got to lose? And the other thing is climb a mountain. Go for a hike, but make it a mountain. I mean, and there's something in the air that makes you kind of go, ooh.
Yeah, the air probably gets a little bit thinner, right? Kind of. So your riskability gets a little bit bigger.
I like that. That's good. More businesses should do. Maybe they should do that constantly. Go for a long hike.
Good ideas are born on the move.
Yeah. And so the name, when you got to that,
we looked for something. When we and afterwards other people stepped into these shoes, they said, wow, that's different. I feel so active, light, activated. And so we were looking for a name that says, hey, activated. And so what's easier than on?
And it's just so stunningly simple, isn't it? I mean, I remember when I first met you, this is some years ago, 10 years ago, maybe like that. And I'll be honest with you, I looked at it and I loved the name, but I didn't recognize it from the logo. And I thought, oh God, have they made a mistake here? But what was interesting about that is I kept thinking about it. And it was like my brain was going, it's called On, and I'm looking at it, trying to rationalize the logo. And then, of course, stupidly, I got it. But in research, I guarantee that would have not worked.
No, I'm sure it would have totally bombed. And we still get kind of, how could you do that? Also, especially from a digital advertising point of view, On is not the most recognizable word. And so, probably you're second guessing, but it definitely has a certain iconic quality to it.
We were just chatting before the cameras rolled, and I was watching Wimbledon, and you had some female players, I think, who got to the final. And they were just being interviewed, and they just had the shirt with the logo on it. And I just thought, that really does look cool.
No, it looks very cool on Iga Swiatek. Yeah. It helped that she won Wimbledon as well. So that really became an iconic moment for us.
But it looked good. I mean, I always remember Andre Agassi, when he tried to play Wimbledon. He had the worst clothing I've ever seen in my life, with colours all over it, and he could only play Wimbledon that you're only allowed a certain amount of colour, and they decolored him, so to speak. So it was like it was either white or he had to wear white. But I thought he looked so unstylish until he actually got to Wimbledon. Then it looked really cool because he was going. And the logo, your logo, looks just brilliant in that simplicity, and it becomes a character, doesn't it?
It is a character, and we actually did now just at the Super Bowl, we did a commercial with Elmo and Roger Federer, where Elmo asks Roger, what should that be? I read kind of DQ.
Yeah.
And Roger tries to explain, and Elmo says, "You don't know your alphabet, Mr. Federer." And so we made a bit fun about the logo. And then, of course, everyone was talking about it's actually called On.
So there you are. You financed it with friends, family,
Fools.
Whoever. And when did you launch your first shoe?
So we launched our shoe not just a few months after we had decided to really do it. So I was heading off to Asia with the phone number of a factory. We didn't know anything about manufacturing. So building that.
So nothing at all. It was like
nothing at all.
I suppose we have to make it. Where do we make it?
Our whole industry is a OEM manufacturing industry. So somebody has to know how to do that. So we had to invent the molds to be able to put these holes, these clouds into the shoes. But then a few months later, we had our first prototypes. We were very, very proud.
That must have been a great moment. Have you kept that? By the way, have you kept the shoe that you ran in up and down to kind of?
No, unfortunately, I destroyed it. But we have a lot of early prototypes because we ran through a lot of prototypes. But we got this first 1,000 pairs back from my trip to Asia, and then we handed into the biggest sports fair, ISPO in Munich. And a few weeks later, they called us and said, "Hey, you won the biggest innovation award of ISPO," and we were on all the billboards in Munich, and so we had a very early breakthrough moment.
That's fantastic. And of course, that goes back to the innovation that you put in to the shoe in the first place. It really stood out. It's quite interesting, actually, because I often say to people, I don't like marketing. I think it is often used to kind of cover things, to disguise the lack of innovation or the lack of difference or whatever it might be. And there you are proving again that if you've got this innovation, if you've got this point of difference, it stands out and people notice it.
I think you're mentioning something super important. For us, it was back to basics and not to marketing, because I think the whole running and sneaker industry was full of marketing. And so we went back to basics. A unique technology that is not about foams, but really about engineering. It's engineering technology that you can actually see, that you can feel. Then it's back to simplicity when it comes to design, even when it comes to the design of the logo. And so stripping it back to the essential, that was important. Yeah. Form follows function.
It's interesting, actually. I was thinking the other day, if you look at so many garments we wear today, they started as a functional garment. Look at a pair of jeans, Carhartt as a brand, or tennis shirts, Adidas. They all start with a function, and that function holds on to them. Burberry, you look at kind of how it kind of developed from a raincoat and why the raincoat was the way it was. But there's a sort of tension between form and fashion. And how do you hold on to that tension and make sure that fashion doesn't override form?
I mean, we're an innovation brand, so it always starts with the innovation. And I feel that design part is capturing that core of that innovation and elevating that, which also is grounded in functionality, because, if you add too much form, you also add weight to a product and the shoe becomes heavier. And so it's detrimental to the function. So there's definitely a connection between form and function. But of course, form also has then the added task to inspire, to celebrate the innovation in the best possible way. But it should never become decoration. I think if it just becomes decoration, then you lost it.
I think the word integrity is important to an iconic brand.
I feel so as well. And so if you start as a innovation brand, as a sports brand, that will always be the integrity part. You actually serve a purpose. You help people to move. You help people to move better. And that is always the core. Whether that's winning a marathon like Helen Obiri,
2:19 or something. She's
yes,
just broken the record,
in
hasn't
our
she?
new light spray shoe,
Yeah.
or whether that's just kind of your evening movement through the woods to clear your mind and finish your day, doesn't matter. But I think movement is always something that is forward orientation, and it's actually also something that triggers something in your mind as well. And I think that's an interesting space.
How it affects you as an individual, as a person. But again, getting to that iconic status is it requires all of the things to work together, doesn't it? It's kind of, you need a product with innovation at heart. You need a kind of a moment in time when it's right. You need people who adopt it, and it constantly adds value to their life and their way of living.
Yeah, probably time is an important thing as well. So often something that at the beginning was probably seen as unusual, sometimes even ugly, over time became an icon because it was a departure. It was something new. And we heard a lot when people looked at the outsole, wow, these holes, these clouds, that's weird. And so I feel sometimes weirdness is a good thing because it is something foundational that over time can turn into an icon.
The more truthful a piece of communication, the more power it has. Which is why I applaud hotel brand Premier Inn's promise that you know what you're getting with Premier Inn. People don't stay there for luxury, even for the price point. It's for the consistency it offers. But how do you create buzz around a comfortable bed, a clean room? One answer is stage a live Twitch stream.
Am I live? Am I streaming?
Night
Jesus.
at Premier Inn took a British creator, blindfolded him and placed him in a mystery Premier Inn. People tuning in could vote on what happened during his stay while he tried to figure out where he was. The event delivered over 881,000 unique viewers. And most importantly, he fell asleep on live stream, proving that you really do know what you're getting with Premier Inn. Learn more about custom campaigns with Brand Innovation Lab at advertising.amazon.com. So I think that point of difference that I think it always intriguing to me is that the point of a brand is to be different, and yet kind of research wants to make it the same and then say, why are you there? So you've created something different, but the danger must be that there's all this kind of urge to kind of make it more like something else so you can sell more, and it becomes the brand leader rather than the brand leader. That's always the danger, isn't it?
It is, and I feel if you're just giving in to consumers pretty much being your decision committee, that's not going to work. But in the case of On, we're an innovation brand, so we're constantly reinventing. We're sometimes even disrupting ourselves. So the next technology is the successor of the previous technology, and that's always something new. So that it stays fresh and also needs answers to the functional needs of consumers.
That's, again, you're making that point that when you deal with large organizations, when you deal with corporate organizations, they gradually erode those differences and they fear change and they fear kind of this is different, where you're saying, no, that actually adds to our value. You've just got to make sure the difference works. What about timing? Do you think your timing was right? Do you think there was do you all look back and go, gosh, we got our timing right?
Yes, I think in hindsight it was perfect timing because we were just coming out of the financial crisis. And yes, of course, there were large incumbents, but not a lot had happened. And so I feel the night is always darkest before dawn. And so I think we hit that spot in having Ollie coming up to Casper and myself with that idea for a shoe. And then deciding, yes, this is the right moment on that mountain climb was perfect. And actually you saw then a lot of innovation in the sports and especially in the running industry, us coming up with the first visual technology, cloud tech and engineering principle, but then the super shoes that were created in the whole industry. So it was a massive trigger of innovation over the next 15 years.
And that, obviously, you can't manufacture that. It happened and you took advantage of it. I mean, they say timing's everything in life, and to a certain extent, not everything, but it does help. And the other thing, of course, is that your association with Roger Federer was obviously, one looks at it as a masterstroke, but of course, everybody looks at it and goes, well, that was obvious, wasn't it? But not necessarily so. And that's helped the brand enormously, hasn't it?
It was. We were 8 years into the journey, so sometimes we forget a little bit. It was a 15-year overnight success, right? So so we were already 8 years in. And a lot of these partnerships that we have that are very genuine happened by serendipity or potentially even by intention, because Roger had put a picture of him in on shoes at Roland Garros on Instagram. And so we took that as an invitation to a date. And so as we know, some people in Switzerland that know each other, that know us both, they organized a blind date. And the rest is history.
And that's fantastic. I love that. And he had actually adopted you. So it has a real great, lovely
he
story.
Reached out and we had a great dinner together, talked about everything that is relevant for us, and design and sports and fashion and athlete performance. And then a few months later, he came to the lab and he had challenged us and said, hey, can you bring your visual technology to tennis? And we brought cloud tech to tennis, and he tested it and was, hey, how can I get involved? And we said, you're not so much about the classic company with classic athlete endorsement. So we have an idea. If instead of us giving you money, why don't you give us money? And so he invested in On and became a co-entrepreneur.
That's brilliant. That's a great story. That I love that. And you turned the tables on it, which is great. But yeah, I mean, you look at so many brands trying to adopt a kind of famous person, whatever it is, and I've always said it's a very dangerous place to be, because you're promoting the person rather than who you are. Thought in all your marketing and communication, the product must be the hero, because that's the star of the show. That's what people really want to know about if you're running great communication. You've gone then, so you've obviously you've got other athletes, but you've also gone to sort of other stars as well. Was that a kind of a tricky moment, going to other people who are not necessarily fundamentally sports people?
It was always important that they're very close to movement. So take, for example, FK Twix, who's an amazing performance artist. Body is Art was her latest show that was fully also kind of immersed in On. But also Zendaya is an incredible performer. Ultimately, our mission is to make people move, because we feel if people move, it's not just about the body, but something happens in your mind as well. You come back from that run or that hike or whatever your movement was, a little bit more optimistic, probably with a new perspective, probably some problems solved. And so we feel that movement and mind are closely interlinked, and that actually is expressed in our mantra, Dream On, which is very much very much that explorer spirit that On stands for.
Yeah, no, I understand it. So success grows, you're doing incredibly well, and then you decide to IPO. What was the logic there? Was to just to be able to invest more in the company? Because it's a big moment, that, isn't it? Because three of you are kind of running it. You've got this band. You know, one balances the other. It's very important to have three too. I know some partnerships, I don't know, but they had to get another partner in to make it three because they couldn't make any decisions. They kept disagreeing. So the three of you are there and you sort of go, right, we now, you know, there's a big chance we need capital to drive it. What was the logic?
Logic was, I mean, we started the three of us, so the boy group. But the boy group over time, over the first 11 years, became a big orchestra. So we have an amazing amount of players in that orchestra that play with us. And it also goes back to that hike because we had a discussion there. Do we see that as a Swiss running brand or do we see it as a global running brand? And from the get-go, we said, hey, you can't think a car company small, or you can't think an aviation company small. So you also can't think a running brand sneaker company small. So it has to be a global company. And so we had opened over 60 countries in these first 11 years. And it was very clear we're becoming a global company. The US was by far and still is by far our biggest market. And so it became very clear that we also want to be a listed company that has the access to capital for all the future growth.
Was that a difficult decision? Was there a moment there when you said, I'm losing control?
It was not so difficult because it also gave us, our existing shareholders trusted us with continue to control the company. So to this day, we control the majority of the votes in On, which I feel is important because you want to have this global access, but at the same time, you want to be the guardian of that core element of this cultural foundation of the brand to make sure that you always take the right decision, which is playing the long game and not just the next quarter.
So that, without going into the details, so the important thing there is that you held on to still maintained being the decision makers, that you weren't being driven by the market.
That's right.
That's crucial. Do you think about kind of how you hand the company on? Who will inherit it? Is that a conversation that you have at all?
No, frankly not. I mean, it's a
You're
public.
having too much fun.
We're having too much fun. We're expanding at a rapid pace. So we feel the best days are ahead of us at On. The best days for On are ahead of us. And so we're thinking about the immediate future over the next 5 years, but not decades out.
No. Well, I mean, I suppose you have to think like that. I used to say to people about my career, and they said, do you have a 5-year plan? I say, no, I have a 5-minute plan. If I can make the next thing I do brilliant, it'll open up all kinds of doors. Companies so often trip up and fail when they IPO, the soul of the company goes, and you can see it drift. You know, you can see that drift. And holding on to, as you've done, the decision-making processes means that hasn't happened.
No, that hasn't happened. And I feel we have a very strong culture at On that plays the long game. It's very much founded on the explorer spirit, which basically say even if things start to become very comfortable, let's set sail. And even if you don't know exactly where the destination is, and you probably can't call home the next day, and the athlete spirit, of course, which is even if you're winning, you get up the next morning and you start to train again because you know now you have a target on your back.
Yes.
And so this is very foundational to our culture. And so we carry that into the future and we're having a lot of fun with the team.
That's important. Is there, looking back, is there something you regret you didn't do or should have done? Is there, if somebody said, did you make any mistakes that you think, oh, I wouldn't do that again?
Probably we should have started some things earlier.
That's always a great answer. I should have started earlier.
We should have started some things earlier. And advice that I often got, especially in the early days, is stay focused, stay and just do footwear. And so we put, for example, going into apparel a bit off. And sometimes I wish we would have done it earlier, because then if you're becoming a footwear company, it's still a big step to become an apparel company as well. And we see that now, for example, in our new markets, like in Asia, we're a full sports brand. They don't kind of see us as a footwear brand. They don't see us as a pure apparel brand, but they see us as an overall brand. So in a certain sense, how early you start something anchors you also as a brand in one category or more holistically across a whole range of categories.
And I'm always fascinated about how far do you go? How do you define yourself as the clothing brand that you become? Because obviously you started with a great piece of innovation, but then you're going into t-shirts. Does that have innovation in it, or does it still rely upon that brilliant shoe to carry that forward?
I mean, it's definitely still rooted in innovation. So you can buy a T-shirt from On, for example, that is made of Clean Cloud, a material that we developed that is created from carbon emissions and then turned into a T-shirt. So there's a lot of innovation going into apparel as well. But it's now, of course, super interesting as sports, in a sense, is the new fashion. We have changed our lives, and with us, our fashion, our apparel has changed. And so we're one of the brands that caters to a modern life.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think sports has democratized clothing, hasn't it? Because anybody can wear it, from a kid, picking up a tennis racket for the first time to somebody hugely wealthy. You all share it. Whereas, 50, 60, 70 years ago, your suit was made in Savile Row, but nobody could afford that. But now we can all wear the same thing. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it and thinking about it.
I feel it's not just about affordability, but it's also how our lives has changed. I feel there have always been really kind of seminal moments where a change in society also led to a change of guard in archetypes, what you're wearing. So, I mean, one of the famous ones, Coco Chanel, liberating women with trousers, first women trousers. Yeah. And that was at the same time where female liberation in society also started. And now, of course, sports has become not just a weekend activity where you use sports gear as equipment, but it has become a way of life, because now the structure of our lives between sports, between work and then life, it all flows into each other. And so some of the most important fashion archetypes today are not fashion archetypes, but are actually sports archetypes. Take the sneaker, take the sweatpant, take the backpack. So it's really a change of guard.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, that sort of sense of so many brands are about liberating you. That's a very interesting way I've never actually quite thought about it in that way, but that's in a sense what you're doing. I mean, obviously yours is aligned to sport, but it also has a sense of liberation at its core, which I think that's quite profound, actually. That's quite an interesting way of thinking. I'm going to ask you one more thing, which is, what's the one thing that you'd like people to take out of this conversation or your experience in starting On?
I feel there's an incredible value in the what if question. What if? That's the question of dreamers, of explorers, of entrepreneurs. And so asking that question and then answering it boldly as an explorer without feeling you have too much to lose, that's incredibly powerful. That has created nations, it has created companies, it has created brands, it has created ideas. And so I really feel that's very meaningful.
That is the thing that people should think about. Yes. I've got another 40 questions, but I haven't got time to answer them.
Thank you very much, John.
If you want to explore how creativity can work for you, head over to thebusinessofcreativity.com. See you next time.